Mainstream pop fans probably have never heard of Burna Boy, so let me break it down. Burna Boy is an Afrofusion artist based out of Nigeria. If you've never heard of Afrofusion, take elements of R&B, hip-hop, pop, and reggae, and many other elements of music, and throw them all together, and you have Afrofusion, for what sounds like something incredible. Burna Boy is an artist that is known and loved all across the world. Those watching this internationally know who Burna Boy is very well, and probably love his music. For those of you who don't know who Burna Boy is, he's worked with artists like Stormzy, he's worked with J-Hus, he's worked with Sam Smith, he worked with Pop Smoke, and he just recently worked with Justin Bieber on Justice. The artist is everywhere. To this date, Burna Boy has released 5 studio albums, with only 2 of them charting, with the first one charting being African Giant in 2019. Without a doubt, my favorite album to come out of 2019. And honestly, I don't think anything can top it. It did so well, it even appeared at the Grammys. It got a nomination but didn't win, and I'm still really salty about it, but I digress. A year later, Burna Boy would release a single titled Wonderful. This is a track that was really fun, really catchy, sounded very poppy in a way, but was really a fun song nonetheless, and would hint at his next release titled Twice as Tall, which would later be released in August of 2020. Burna Boy does not disappoint with this album. Fans that really loved African Giant, you will love what you hear on Twice as Tall. But for the record, if I were to pick between African Giant and Twice as Tall, African Giant would stand on that pedestal. But we'll get to that later down the video. For starters, the album starts out very subtly. It doesn't start out really big. It starts out very, calm in a way. It has a grand sound to it, but it doesn't exactly it's not too powerful. It's not overwhelming to the listener the first time they're listening to it to make it oh my god, it doesn't give the listener anxiety when they first listen to it. And then all that's thrown out the window when he puts on Alarm Clock. This song is intense. It goes from this grand but calm sound to intense out of nowhere. And it feels like an interlude almost. The song's very short, but for what we get for about a minute and a half, it's still your blood will be pumping by the end of this song. And then Way Too Big takes those 2 elements, brings them together, and brings us this really great song that once again sounds really poppy. And that's what I start to notice throughout this album. It feels a lot more pop heavy as opposed to other entries that Burna has put in before. And I'm honestly here for it. I think Burna does an incredible job blending the elements of music all into this just remarkable sound. I also enjoy songs like Wonderful, Naughty by Nature, and I especially love the feature by Naughty by Nature. What I notice about this album, and what I notice about Burna Boy that I love, is that all the songs don't feel like they have to fit a structure. They all feel like they're from point A to point B, and it doesn't feel like they're getting forced. It just feels like a nice vibe full of music, and I love everything about it. It's why I like artists like Snow Allegra and Jhené Aiko. These are artists who just make their music to make music. They don't make it have to fit a certain structure, and as a result, it sounds fantastic. As for the last 2 songs, I don't really know how I feel about Stormzy being just a hook. I would have loved to hear a verse from Stormzy. Him and Burna Boy collaborate a lot. And the end felt kind of anticlimactic, if you will. It felt subtle and calm, but I wasn't jazzed with it. Compare that to the final track on African Giant, Spiritual. In fact, compare this whole album to African Giant. What I like about African Giant, and this is why I like African Giant more than Twice as Tall, I think African Giant just keeps the same momentum and pace throughout the entire album. It differentiates it. It starts with the song that's very subtle, but also very fun, if you will. And then you have songs like Anybody, Pull Up is great, Show and Tell with Future, Different with Damian Marley, and the aforementioned Spiritual. It just keeps the same momentum. I feel like it just feels it just is such an incredible listen. That's what I love about African Giant. Twice as Tall feels like it does that as well, but I feel like it varies too much. I think what plagues Twice as Tall is that it tries to jump around to multiple sounds and tones. As I mentioned at the beginning, Level Up, Alarm Clock, and Way Too Big juggle these powerful but also soft sounds. And I think that's what happens throughout the entire album. It jumps around a lot. I think it's what takes me out of a listen as opposed to something like an African Giant. So all in all, I thought this was an incredible listen. I don't think Burna Boy disappointed on this album at all. I think he still delivered on something fantastic. But if I were to compare this to African Giant, I would definitely say African Giant is a much better project. Still, I will be giving Twice as Tall a 3 scratches out of 5. I think this album was really great to listen to. I think it's still, I think it jumps around too much, and I think thematically that could have fixed the album and how it sounded. But all in all, it's still such a great album to listen to. You'll love what you hear upon listening to this, and I highly recommend checking out Burna Boy, whether it's through African Giant or through Twice as Tall.